Let's dive into the evolutions this wonderful, beautiful mess of a franchise had over the first 20 seasons of its existence and break down specifically where we can draw pretty definitive lines between different eras of the show itself. Obviously, a lot has changed season by season. Every 3-4 seasons. For a while there, it feels like we're watching a totally different show. So much is going on. And I, when thinking about this show, kind of like to be able to think about things within the era that they were in. Things of obviously being so different. It's hard to compare certain aspects of the show now versus certain aspects of the show back then. So to help give a framework for when we're talking about top list of this, top list of that later on, let's break down exactly where, now that we're 20 seasons in, being able to look back where the eras are, where those defining lines of the show are. And as mentioned, this is the one time where we're not just going to do the first 20. After I wrote it all out, I figured, why not? It's pretty easy, even without having done a recent deep dive rewatch of every season afterwards. It's pretty easy to break down the rest, so we'll do that very quickly at the end here. Let's start then with the first era of the show. I've come up with names for them. They're not very good names. I will admit that. They could use some work. So DM me at ChallengeHistorian on Instagram if you have a better name, which I'm sure almost anyone will be able to come up with better names. I'm confident where these eras should be, but I didn't put the most effort into my names. But era one for me it could just be called the first era, the dawn of the challenge, but I call it Trial and Error. Trial and Error, the first era, goes from Road Rules All-Stars to Battle of the Sexes. That's seasons 1 through 6. This all starts even before season 1. Real World Boston versus Road Rules The Island. They meet up. Those two seasons cross paths, do a little thing, creates an idea, gives a little spark. Similar time right before that. Not similar time. Right before that, a season before that, 2 seasons before that. I forget the schedule of the Real World. John Brennan, though, on Real World LA, goes on a cross-country bus trip to go get picked up and brought out to LA for his season. That has a seed. Those couple seeds eventually meet in some conference room somewhere in MTV's studios, and they realize we should do something where we involve these two franchises together in some way, and that births Road Rules All-Stars, season 1. In season 1 of the show, make no bones about it, it's called Road Rules All-Stars. It eventually would be called The Challenge season 1 retroactively, but for a while, up into the 4th, 5th, 6th season, I believe it's the 5th season, where they reference what is now season 2, Real World versus Road Rules, and they call it in a little, picture-in-picture thing, they call it season 1. So eventually, Road Rules All-Stars would be considered the dawn of the challenge, not in the moment, because it is straight up a season of Road Rules, just with alumni from this other show the first time they thought, let's bring people back into our lives. And then things continue to experiment. We get seasons 2, 3, and 4 that all use the Real World versus Road Rules moniker and team setup. However, those 3 are at the end of the day, those are just Road Rules seasons, but with 2 teams. They basically have taken Road Rules and they're like, okay, now we know we want to bring people back like we did in season 1. We brought cast members back. That worked really well. People like them. They're still stars. They got some power. People want to be entertained by them. So what if we do Road Rules, but 2 teams, and we bring only alumni from the 2 shows? Do that. They do that for 3 straight seasons, and all kinds of different changes happen to the show. We got celebrity cameos become a major facet of the show. We have live audiences for the games, which is an incredible addition. Season 3 brings tall buildings, cast members punching each other, having to invest your daily winnings, which was a weird one-off that thankfully was a one-off. Season 4 brings more episodes, more money. First player ever is sent home. First time they had to eat gross animal parts. There's the first ever endurance-style final and the first ever reunion, all kinds of new stuff. They're just throwing things at the wall. They think we've got something good here. Let's keep trying. Let's keep iterating. And then comes season 5. They completely change everything entirely, move away from the Road Rules style format that they had been doing now 4 seasons that are in a sense kind of really Road Rules seasons more than anything, and into what would become truly the challenge, from 12 people to 32 people, from in a bus to into houses, staying put, from video clues, voice clues from a bunch of different hosts, a bunch of different Mr. Big, Miss Big type of situation to permanent hosts that are there the whole time, partner based, the whole thing. It's a completely different thing. It's completely trial. A lot of it works, some of it doesn't, but they know we're still building. We're still coming up with something, and then Battle of the Sexes kicks in and it throws Road Rules Real World out the window. Things don't go so well. They still know we've got something great here. We just don't know exactly what to do with it. We've tried a bunch of stuff. Let's pull the best of all those elements and let's put it together. And that is when we transition from Era 1, the trial and error, into Era 2, which for the time being, I am calling Struck Gold, because that's exactly what happens for the next 7 seasons of the show. The Gauntlet to the Duel is the second era of the challenge, and it's arguably as good as any in the history of the show from the beginning to now to maybe ever in the future. The Gauntlet to the Duel, 7 seasons, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It starts with the Gauntlet, which changes the game entirely. It's the first true challenge season in my mind. And I think when you're looking back just kind of objectively, if you're looking for what we now think of as a challenge season, this is the first one, the Gauntlet, that has all the bones, all the ingredients, everything is there. Eliminations, of course, is the biggest part of that, but there's a lot of romance, there's a lot of fighting, there's a beefed up final mission that kind of feels like the first true final. It's still obviously a far cry from the things they're doing these days and even would be doing 7, 8, 9, 10 seasons later. But compared to the ones before it was the first time. It was like, this is going to take a while. This is a real endurance event, multiple checkpoints, a lot of running, all of that. And then the Gauntlet leads into the Inferno, which takes the Gauntlet game, switches up the teams. Now we realize we can do any type of team format we want, but the game with the eliminations is set. Battle of the Sexes 2 happens, thankfully, quickly forgotten. It's a blip on the radar. We get right back to the gold, and that is with Inferno 2, which somehow tops Inferno 1. The Gauntlet 2 then kicks butt. Fresh meat comes in, delivers a partner season and great new cast members, and everything just leads up to the Duel, which hits it out of the park. It's an all-time high. Everything looks great. We've introduced, multiple season character arcs. We have the CTDM payoff, multiple seasons with the two of them. We've got an individual season for the first time where we're fully realized of whatever the format is, any of these formats can work as long as the stories are good, the casting is great, everything else falls in place. And the challenge is just pulling gold out of the river. It's just over its head in gold. Struck Gold, Era 2, Gauntlet to Duel. And then we enter from the Duel with Falls Down, and it falls down quickly. And it clearly enters a new era, which I will call Shooting Themselves in the Foot. That is the third era of the show, and it runs from Inferno 3 to the Ruins 14 through 18. Previously, I've kind of referenced this as the darker period of the show. It certainly is, but I'm going to go with Shooting Themselves in the Foot. The Inferno 3, the Gauntlet 3, they can't come close to their previous 2 in each of those series. It's all of these seasons are a big, long transitional era for the show from star standpoint of the OG stars, the Corals, the Mizes, the Mark Longs, the Veronicas, everyone leaving the game a little bit behind or on maybe one of their last seasons and trying to replace them with a bunch of new people. And it takes a little bit. It takes a little while to establish these new stars. Of course, as we talked about at length over the course of doing all those seasons, the gender dynamics go from whatever they started as, which were decent at one point in the show's history, they go bad, then they go nasty, then they go worse, then they go rock bottom. It's really bad. The competitiveness goes totally out the window. And while we do bring up these new stars, almost all the ones that we get are also kind of total assholes. So we don't have any stars that aren't complete assholes for the most part. And so something's still missing. Things have gone downhill. They start to rise a little bit at the tail end of this era, but it's the Shooting Themselves in the Foot, Inferno 3, Ruins, 14 through 18. And then comes the fourth era, in the shortest era in the history of the show, because this one itself is kind of its own little transition between two bigger, larger ones, but it's very much feels defined, feels like its own 2-season thing. And those are the most recent 2 seasons we've covered on the Rewatch series, which would be Fresh Meat 2 and Cutthroat. Season 19 and 20, I call this Reboot to Greatness. That is what I call Era 4 again. I'm not great at naming. Please help me out. Please let me know some better names for these. But Fresh Meat 2, Cutthroat, they focus on the cast dynamics, making the game itself competitive and interesting, knowing the storylines will just take care of themselves if they get the actual game right and the cast mixture right. We have officially our new crop of stars that are we've really latched on to some of them, and now we're getting a couple new ones, and especially important for the show is we have a new crop of female stars that come into the game. Laurel, Cara Maria, Teresa, and most notably from Fresh Meat 2 that give some balance back to the people who are being put forward as faces of the show, as stars of the show, where it skewed very heavily against the women in the house for quite a few seasons in a row there. Evelyn obviously stars in Fresh Meat 2 as well. And so for these 2 seasons, things suddenly are all the way back. It had fallen so far off, and suddenly just like that, hey, it was all there. We had it. We knew we had gold for a long time. We found our way back. We figured some things out, and we're rebooting to greatness. Now, yes, we stopped with 20 seasons so far on the Rewatch series, but again, this is the one time I'm going to go past it. I'll be a little quicker about this, but just for fun, the eras that happen after this, another reason why this 20 season mark is such a great marker point and kind of point to stop and reflect on things is because this is the end of the 4th era. We have 4 more that would come. The peak is Era 5. I call it the peak because that's what it is. It's the best the show ever has been, will be, could ever be. That is Rivals through X's 2, seasons 21 through 26. Things are just unbelievable. They come up with Rivals, they come up with X's, they have free agents. They do the best, individual season, the 2 best partner concepts, the 2 best concepts they ever will or have come up with. Everything works. New stars every which way you look. Incredible storylines. I can't wait to talk about all of these seasons in the very near future. And then the 6th era I call Now What? Question mark, because it's kind of where they're like, oh wait, we've been so good for so long now that we finally hit that next point where we're running out a little bit. Like we did Rivals twice, we did X's twice, we used to do trilogies and sequels all the time. We're kind of running low on ideas. The real world is kind of gone by this point, or nearly gone. We're on the last breaths of that. Where are we going to get our feeder? So I call the Now What Era 6. That is Bloodlines through Invasion, a short one, 27, 28, and 29, where it's like, shit. What do we do now? We've done it all. We've made this so good. We've made this the best thing in the world. What do we do now? Now what? Era 6 and then Era 7 still got it. They prove they've still got it. Dirty 30 through War of the Worlds 2. That's 30 through 34. Incredible. Absolutely unbelievable that for the 3rd time, they completely and utterly blow everyone away for a series of seasons. This one is the one I think I would get the most pushback on from folks. Some folks have the same opinion I do of Dirty 30 through War of the Worlds 2, which is iconic, amazing, as good as any other really run in the history of the show. Splitting hairs, yes, I'm giving it to Rivals through X's 2. I'm giving it to the peak era, but still got it, Era 7. It's just unbelievable that they enter their 30th season and they can come back in such a strong way and be like, nope, we've got another 5 seasons of pure greatness in us. Incredible stuff. And then the most recent era, the one we are still in, and that I'm willing to even put season 38, which we're currently in, lumped in here. I'm calling it Lost Somewhere in the World, because the franchise, the flagship specifically we're only talking about here, does feel a little bit lost. And somewhere in the world, it tries to go global. They try to change things, completely overhaul it. We're bringing in people from all over the world. And it just, for one reason or another, season by season, things don't work. The format's getting all kinds of convoluted. We don't have new stars. We're hanging on to, like, can we get a CT? Can we get a Bananas? Can we get a Wes? Can we get an Anissa to keep doing them? Can we get Nani to keep doing them? And things are just, we're in an odd period that we've all discussed at length and will continue to every single Wednesday night, Ride or Dies recaps. So Era 8, Lost Somewhere in the World, Total Madness through Ride or Die. So to recap, 8 eras of the history of the show. Trial and Error, Era 1, Road Rules All-Stars, The Battle of the Sexes, that's 1 to 6. Era 2, Struck Gold, Gauntlet to Duel, 7 through 13. Era 3, Shooting Themselves in the Foot, Inferno 3 to Ruins, that's 14 to 18. Reboot to Greatness, the 4th era, Fresh Meat 2 and Cutthroat, the shortest and smallest of the eras of the show. The Peak Era, Era 5, 21 through 26, that's Rivals through X's 2, just to say all those out loud because it's so much fun. How did they even pull this off? Rivals, Battle of the X's, Battle of the Seasons, Battle of the, Rivals 2, Free Agents, Battle of the X's 2. Insanity. And then came now what? Era 6, Bloodlines through Invasions, 27 through 29. Still got it. Era 7, Dirty 30 through War of the Worlds 2. And now we are in the 8th era of this show, Lost Somewhere in the World.